Hello and welcome to Sam Not So Wise. My name is Sam. Today I am doing a spoiler-free review of the Dandelion Dynasty series, the whole series, spoiler-free review style. But today I'm going to do something a little bit different to my usual style. So my usual style is I'll write out a bunch of bullet points and use them as kind of a structure as to how I want the video to go, with some little details, and kind of talk from there. And I tend to stumble a lot and bumble and maybe forget a few things that I wanted to say. So I wanted to try doing a scripted video. So I've written out the entire script of what I want to say for this video. And I'm also doing this so it's like a practice for me for writing well, writing good reviews, and just writing well in general. So if you don't know, I'm an English student, very new English student, and I just want to practice writing. This is in a review style, not necessarily an academic style. And I have actually secretly set up a Substack. I've had that going for a couple of months. So it's a place where you kind of do like writing blog type stuff. I've put like 2 things on there. I'm doing it very slowly as and when I have time to write stuff, just for my own practice. But I have been putting the link in the description below. You've probably not seen it, but if you want to follow some more little writing things that I'm doing in my spare time, then please go and check it out. This will be up there soon after I've basically edited this video. So yeah, I'm just using it as a way to practice writing stuff. It's not going to be frequent, so don't expect lots of writing, but I just want to practice, as I've said. So I have written out this review and I'm just going to read it for you. I know that's a bit boring, but let me know how you feel about this. It may be a little bit more formal, hopefully less stumbly, but no promises, because that's just me. So yeah, I guess with that and much further ado, let's talk about the Dandelion Dynasty. This is a non-spoiler review of Ken Liu's epic fantasy series, The Dandelion Dynasty, written between 2015 and 2022. Reviewing a series in a non-spoiler fashion presents numerous difficulties in exploring a grand-scale piece of art with any depth. Therefore, I will attempt to give as good an account as possible of several elements of the story that I deem important and relevant to this specific set of books. My focuses will be on the general structure of the series, its world building, plot, characters, writing style, and themes explored. As a precursor to the bulk of the review, I found this series to be one that holds a strange position in my head. This is a series that achieves magnitudes in its thousands of pages and contains many elements that I deeply respect, and brings much that is new to the genre. Simultaneously, there were large stretches of the series in which I cannot say I was enjoying the reading experience itself, which is largely down to the writing style and repetitions of writing techniques employed throughout. This, of course, is a matter of personal taste, and one which may not bother other readers. Consequently, while I will praise much of the elements of the series, I will remember a lot of it with fondness and admiration. It doesn't hold a place as an all-time favourite for me. The first thing to note is that the structure of the series itself doesn't follow a conventional path. Book 1, The Grace of Kings, acts almost as a very long prequel to the series proper, in that it sets up what Liu himself describes as the main bulk of the story, starting with Book 2, Wall of Storms. The first book travels at a breakneck speed, with a constant flitting between episodic shorter stories that make up the whole of a series of battles for power over the island continent of Dara. Characters don't live long, as we speed run some huge events in history, leaving the characterization lacking apart from 2 main characters in the wily Kunigaru and the honor-obsessed Mata Zindu. Enjoyers of constant ebb and flow and almost mythological style storytelling will find this first installment unputdownable, whilst those who enjoy taking their time with building characterization and tension may suffer from whiplash. With the history and world of Dara set up in Book 1, Wall of Storms immediately applies the brakes and settles into what may be seen as a more typically sedentary pace for a fantasy epic. Court intrigue and political scheming take centre stage for the first half of this book, where Dara acquaints itself with a time of long-lasting peace. Here, fans of character development can begin to see characters get fleshed out, and fans of political fantasy will be happy with the many underhand and overt scheming that occurs in Adara taking a new shape in a new era. Don't rest too easily, however. Halfway through the book, something rather unexpected occurs which completely rewrites the script and sends Dara into a state of panic. What follows is a war of the like that is completely unprecedented in these lands as the island continent grapples with a people they have never met or even heard of. A further spanner in the works is that the final books were conceived of as one behemoth of a book, something that Liu himself expresses in the notes at the end of Book 3, The Veiled Throne. But seeing as this would result in a book that is 2,000 pages long, something no sensible bookbinder will attempt and no sensible reader will attempt, Liu had to split the book in two. This almost acts as a middle book in a trilogy, where the ending of the previous book was so momentous that we need to start building up again towards a climax at the end of the series. Therefore, the Veiled Throne sees our two opposing sides licking their wounds in a time of relative peace, in which plans are being set and the chess pieces carefully move around. The final book, Speaking Bones, sees the expected ramping of tension leading to an almighty culmination and resolutions to the many thread lines built over the series. And conclude it does. Concluding books either wrap things up tightly in a bow or leave us to interpret the final outcome. Speaking Bones is a worthy finale to a series in that we are left with much of the former, bringing even minor characters satisfying endings to their arcs, and yet it leaves us pondering what the future will look like, with uncertainty and doubt a main theme explored right in the final pages. To quickly summarise the plot of the 4-book series in a non-spoiler fashion, this is a story that focuses on the control over an island continent nation with many twists and turns as to who is in control and as to the correct form of governance. It is about this land passing through many stages of turmoil with the end goal of a peace that is long-lasting and beneficial to as many occupants as feasibly possible. This land that lived in a form of seclusion, having heard of distant lands but never experiencing them, are exposed to a wider world and the brutal effects of coming into contact with a people so different to them. The major conflict therefore turns to a strong focus of management of such external threats while still struggling to maintain balance within. As for the world of Dara, fans of depth and world building will find a rich tapestry woven with love and care, with attention to detail making it feel believable and full of history. The Grace of Kings does a lot of the legwork in this regard in its saga-like storytelling, which sets up many of the important historical events and figures and takes place across the whole of the island world. However, the learning of Dara continues steadily throughout the further 3 books, as whenever a new character or setting is introduced, we are given flashbacks that put these in their historical context. It is fair to say, as with many fantasy settings, places of import are of course given precedence, and we learn much more about the capital city and areas of conflict compared to parts of the land that are less politically or tactically important. This doesn't mean, though, that we are unfamiliar with other areas of the world, as characters are from all over the land, which becomes important to their personality and outlook in life. The same treatment is given to the new land introduced in Book 2, providing us with a truly large-scale world in which culture, history, customs and the landscapes are easily distinguishable, believable and well understood to the reader. It is important to note that the story is very much rooted in Chinese history and culture. Liu uses his vast knowledge of China to base much of the plot details, culture and technological and social advancements to shape his series. Being someone who has next to no knowledge of this part of history, it is difficult for me to ascertain to what extent this is mirrored and when or whether it stops in the series. I've heard it said that people who know this part of the world can essentially predict exactly what will happen. Therefore, readers must go into this series knowing that it could swing 2 ways for them. Either they could find it highly derivative or highly inspired. If you're new to this history or part of the world, as I am, This could read as a refreshing setting with cultures, customs, and storytelling techniques that read extremely differently to the sword and sorcery medieval Europe settings that we have read 100 times before in fantasy. A final point to mention within the world are its fantasy elements, what makes this series a work of fantasy literature. These are few and far between, with the largest factor being that this is a completely secondary world. There is no magic in this world. In fact, the series highly focuses on engineering and the advancement of science, with the phrase "the universe is knowable" working as a catchphrase for many key characters. This isn't hard magic, but rather technology that mirrors our own advancements and is fully explainable as nature. There is a pantheon of gods, but in reality, they largely take a backseat and we witness their discussions and arguments as they watch the mortals play their war games and shape the world to their will. Their involvement is very minor, by influencing a few characters with words, thoughts, or the occasional nudge in the direction that the god wants them to go. Perhaps the largest element are the fantasy creatures, with large and intelligent sea beasts cropping up from time to time. In the second book, Liu introduces his version of dragons. Even as a fantasy fan, I must admit that I am not the biggest fan of dragons. Unsubscribe. But Ken Liu's Gorinophins are perhaps my favourite dragons to date. This is largely because they feel more plausible as opposed to the common depiction of dragons in medieval-inspired fantasy. These dragons do not talk or have magical powers, but are essentially powerful flying cows with antlers who breathe fire and can be ridden and tamed. But they have big limits to their power, only being able to fly and breathe fire in limited amounts. Furthermore, as this is a series with a focus on learning, we find out exactly how they work. Liu turns dragons from a nigh on impossible to beat, almost godlike creature to an understandable and limited yet powerful fantastical beast. When it comes to characterization, it being a large-scale fantasy series means the obvious. There are a lot of named characters. As the name of the series suggests, it is dynastic in nature, and we have particular focus on a ruling family. The time span of the series means that it is a generational story, and we follow the family through its tumultuous reign from its founder down to his grandchildren. The political drama nature of the story necessitates that we also get heavy focus on the important people of power surrounding this dynasty, including politicians, war generals, and important scholars. To the extent that this is relevant, when the people from a new land are introduced in Book 2, we are given a similar treatment. Occasionally, we are introduced to someone from a lower class, but this almost inevitably leads to their development in which they become important through magnificent feats of daring or engineering marvels. Again, due to the time span involved, it is necessary to introduce and remove characters over the course of the series. New characters are introduced or focused on rather late in the series, who ultimately end up as key movers in the overall story. Liu is also not afraid to kill off important characters, so it is vital not to get too attached. This characterization begins in Book 2. As mentioned previously, the first book focuses heavily on quick-moving events to set up the backstory of the story proper. The natures of the characters are mixed in terms of depth and flatness, and each serves their purpose well through these traits. Lovers of deeply flawed and complex characters will find many in this series, with a few rising to prominence on both sides of the conflict. Even now, as I attempt to put my thoughts into words, I still cannot decide on how to feel about Jia, a truly marvellous character who could be studied endlessly. Some of the antagonists are truly hateable, and I am left feeling similarly. In some ways their actions seem believable whilst truly being evil, and yet I do wonder if Liu takes their atrocities and reasoning a step beyond the believable. Either way, all are given fully fleshed out histories and motivations for their actions, and there are many memorable characters. My biggest issue when it comes to the Dandelion Dynasty comes in the form of writing style. This has nothing to do with the prose itself, which is functional and accessible. Furthermore, because the series has large elements of philosophy, we are party to some wonderfully thoughtful passages as well as lyrical passages of poetry for those who like their prose leaning towards the purple side of the spectrum. The dialogue can be truly gripping too, especially when political intrigue is reaching a climax and smart educators and politicians are discussing highly tense issues surrounding governing, scheming and war. However, this is somewhat kept to a minimum as this series is highly expository in nature and we are often told instead of shown events. This is especially the case in The Grace of Kings, but continues as far as heavily into the final book. Where my problems reach their peak is in the incredibly frequent use of flashbacks. I have absolutely no problems with flashbacks and think they can be a wonderful technique in storytelling. Where my problem lies is when they completely disrupt the flow of the story and when they are used with high frequency. I do believe that this is employed in the Dandelion Dynasty so much because this is a feature of classic Chinese storytelling, and that is completely understandable. But the story beats in any scene of action or set piece become extremely predictable and make for a very disjointed reading experience. Without fail, in a battle scene, there comes a moment where our protagonists look like they're in trouble. Enter a new technological advancement. Here we get a flashback as to how this advancement was conceived and the troubles of its construction. Back to the battle. Hooray! It's working. But wait a moment, the antagonists have worked out how to counter this, so let's introduce our next secret weapon. Now comes the flashback as to how it was conceived and the trouble of its construction. Back to the battle. Hooray! It's working. But wait! Those wily antagonists have learned to counter this and it looks like all hope is lost. Now enter the final new invention, which was put together out of all desperation and a last resort. And guess what? We're flashing back to see how it was conceived and the troubles overcome in making it. Hooray! It worked. Okay, this was a pretty fun battle sequence. Let's repeat this technique many times in each book. And not only is it with battle scenes, but with any moment involving high tension and stakes. There are numerous occasions throughout the series in which a confrontation between two sets of people are known to be about to occur in the near future. Somehow, our protagonists know, through their own pure genius and knowledge of these people, exactly how those counterparts are going to react, causing their plan to work to perfection. And we don't just watch this occur. We get all of the flashbacks in which we see them working this out as according to events in the past that make this relevant to the current issue and flashing back to the relevant piece of genius happening in the scene. Not only is this repetitious, but the flashbacks are incredibly unnecessarily long-winded. Not only are they long-winded, but we get extremely technical explanations that describe technology in infinitely small details that read like a textbook. This may be a form of storytelling that appeals to many readers, but for this unwise one, it became incredibly frustrating to flash back for long periods of time in which I had no care for how a specific piece of machinery fits with another one, creating something not seen before in a language that I do not comprehend as a humanities student. Furthermore, the plot beats repeated so many times that I knew how the set piece would evolve, just not with what piece of new machinery. With my large moan out of the way, I want to finish on a big strength of the series, its use and inclusion of themes. Ken Liu had so much to say, it could be the whole focus of an undergraduate dissertation. And whilst perhaps you could ascertain Liu's stance on the themes explored, he is by no means grinding an axe and presents the reader with many interpretations with much nuance and subtlety, really getting to the heart of why the relevant theme is important to discuss. The theme that seems to me to be the heart of the story is what it means to rule. Where there are many ways of ruling a nation, which is the correct one? How do you understand fairness and equality, and what means does one use to implement such stances? Is it possible to rule with complete fairness, or is suffering inevitable at some level of society? Are cycles of war and corruption inevitable, or is it possible to set up a system that will include checks and balances to make them impossible? Whilst the greater good is a somewhat common theme in fantasy literature, it is one that is important and has endless levels to explore. And here Liu explores it with real grace and panache, with true emotional sensitivity and breadth. But it doesn't stop there. As previously mentioned, the series has a large focus on the importance of education and literacy in an evolving society, where technological advancements are to be celebrated and could turn not only the tide of war, but benefit the general populace. This leads to important discussions of tradition versus innovation. How important is it to honour what made us who we are, and to what level do we hold on to the past? With further regards to the past, this series explores the notion of legacy and how history views the actions of those in power. How telling stories and the warping of truths, as according to those speaking them, warps the past into something other than what it really was. How can we truly know the past when it is difficult to know the truth of the present? The Dandelion Dynasty also heavily explores the theme of culture clashes, where two peoples come into contact with each other. What do they have in common, and is it possible to reconcile the huge differences between them? This is but a mere skimming of the themes involved in the series, and it serves as a buffet for those interested in such philosophical musings. To conclude, the Dandelion Dynasty holds a strange place in my brain, and will take some time for it to fully coalesce into my final feelings about it. There is so much to appreciate and enjoy about this series, with a wonderful freshness brought to the fantasy genre, where you can get lost in a beautifully realised world that is full of fascinating characters and thoughtful exploration of important themes. It does, however, have its problems in the way it tells the story, potentially putting people off with constant flashbacks and repetitive plot sequences. The books are also rather long, and I believe could be cut back by a couple of 100 pages each after The Grace of Kings. What results is an epic that is certainly worth attempting at least the first two books of, if you are looking for a read that is different and challenging in many regards. The Dandelion Dynasty is a series I will forever respect, but is one that was not enjoyable for long stretches of its colossal length. So that is the end of today's video, and Informal Sam is back to say goodbye to you. So please let me know what you thought of this different style of video, whether it was just too informal or whether you liked it. Also, please do let me know if you've read the Dandelion Dynasty and what you thought about it, what you thought about my thoughts. Feel free to go and check out my new Substack. Like I said, I don't post very frequently. It just depends on how busy I am, but I'm kind of halfway through writing something else at the moment, and I hope to improve and increase the amount I'm writing. And like I said, I'm just starting, so please be kind. I hope to do this for a long time and gradually improve at this skill. You know, this is a skill that takes practice, and that is what I'm doing. So if you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And if you like the video, please like it. If you're new to the channel, please think about subscribing. And that is it. So I will see you in a new video soon. Thank you so much, and goodbye.